Dadperfectrevenge. We heard you bought this gorgeous cabin in Colorado. We're moving in to leave all the grudges behind. My daughter-in-law Scarlett barked, shoving her suitcases through my door like she already owned the place. I just smiled and let them barge in. But the second they stepped into the great room and saw what was waiting for them, every drop of color drained from their faces. My name is Byron Mitchell. I'm 58 years old and I live in a mountain cabin near Aspen, Colorado. For 25 years, I built something from nothing. Started as a welder in a small shop in Denver after my discharge from the Marines. Ended up owning Mitchell Metalworks with 30 employees. Sold the whole operation 2 years ago for $2.1 million. Not bad for a kid from Kansas who joined the Corps straight out of high school and did 2 tours in Iraq. Those early days after coming home were tough. I remember standing in that first welding shop on East Colfax Avenue, sparks flying around me, trying to forget what I'd seen overseas. The work helped. There's something honest about melting metal, joining pieces together to make something stronger. I started as just another grunt with a torch, but I paid attention. Watched how the business ran, learned the books, figured out which customers paid on time and which ones would string you along for months. After 5 years, I had enough saved to rent my own bay, then a whole shop. Then I was hiring guys, teaching them the same skills that had kept my hands busy and my mind focused. By the time Garrison was born, I had 8 employees and more work than we could handle. My son Garrison came along when I was 26. His mother Sarah died in a car accident when he was just 4 years old. Drunk driver ran a red light on I-25. After that, it was just me and the boy. I'd bring him to the shop after school, set up a little workbench where he could practice with scraps while I handled the real jobs. By age 12, he could run a clean bead better than some of my apprentices. Those were good years. Garrison would ask 1,000 questions while we worked. "Dad, why does this joint fail here? What makes this steel different?" He had natural hands for the work, and more importantly, he had the patience. Metalwork teaches you that you rush, you make mistakes, you take your time, you make something that lasts. We worked side by side for 8 years after he graduated high school. I was grooming him to take over the business eventually. The boy understood quality, understood what it meant to put your name on your work. We'd tackle the tough jobs together, structural repairs on old buildings, custom fabrication for the oil rigs up north. I was proud of him. Then he met Scarlett Kelly. Scarlett was 26 when Garrison brought her around the first time, working as a loan officer at First National Bank downtown. Pretty girl, knew how to dress. Talked a good game about financial planning and investment strategies. She seemed sharp, and I figured that kind of business sense might be good for Garrison. The changes started small. Garrison began declining our usual Friday night poker games with the crew. Said Scarlett wanted to do more cultural things, art galleries, wine tastings, that kind of stuff. Nothing wrong with expanding your horizons, I thought. Maybe she'd help him grow, but then he started questioning everything we did at the shop. "Dad, Scarlett says we're undercharging for our services. Dad, she thinks we should focus more on commercial contracts instead of these small repair jobs." Always, Scarlett says this, or Scarlett thinks that. The wedding was a big affair at some fancy hotel in Cherry Creek. Cost more than I'd ever spent on anything except the down payment on the shop. Garrison asked me to walk him down the aisle since his mother wasn't there to see it. When I handed him off to Scarlett, she whispered, "Don't worry, Byron. I'll take good care of him." I should have paid attention to how she said it. After the honeymoon, things changed faster. Garrison started coming in late, leaving early. When I'd ask him about a job or a technique, he'd get this distant look. "I don't know, Dad. Maybe we should hire more experienced guys to handle the complicated stuff." This was the same boy who'd figured out how to repair a cracked engine block when he was 19 years old. The breaking point came about a year after the wedding. I found out Garrison had been meeting with business brokers, getting valuations on the shop without telling me. When I confronted him, he couldn't look me in the eye. "Dad, Scarlett just thinks we should explore our options. The business is worth a lot more than we realized. Our options for what? Selling, moving into something more stable, less physical." I stared at this stranger wearing my son's face. "Garrison, this business is your inheritance. Your grandfather was a metal worker in Wichita. Your great-grandfather forged horseshoes in Oklahoma Territory. This is who we are." "That's old thinking, Dad." Scarlett says we need to be more strategic about building wealth. Scarlett says, always Scarlett says. 6 months later, Garrison gave me his notice. Said he was taking a job with the city as a heavy equipment technician. Good benefits, regular hours, no stress about running a business. I tried to talk him out of it, but his mind was made up. I'll still help out sometimes on weekends, he promised. But he never did. I kept the business going for another year, but the heart had gone out of it. Without Garrison there to pass it on to, I was just another old man working with his hands. So when a competitor offered to buy me out, I took the deal. $2.1 million for 25 years of work seemed fair enough. With the money, I bought this cabin up in the mountains. 3,400 square feet of timber and stone overlooking the roaring Fork Valley cost me $1.8 million. The realtor called it my retirement dream home. I called it my place to lick my wounds and figure out what went wrong with my son. That was 2 years ago. In all that time, Garrison called maybe once a month. Our conversations were stilted, careful, like we were strangers making small talk. He'd ask how I was doing. I'd ask about his job, and neither of us would mention the shop or what we'd lost. But 6 months ago, I accidentally learned the truth about what I'd really lost. I'd called Garrison's phone that Tuesday evening, just wanting to hear his voice, maybe see if he'd come up for a weekend of fishing. The phone rang twice, then went to voicemail. I was about to hang up when it buzzed back. He must have pocket-dialed me. Their voices came through crystal clear. That old man's sitting on over $2 million. Scarlett was saying, her tone sharp and calculating, like she was discussing livestock prices. When's he going to kick the bucket and stop being such a burden? My hand tightened on the phone. I waited for Garrison to defend me, to say something, anything that sounded like the boy I'd raised. Soon, hopefully, my son replied. He's not getting any younger, and with that heart thing he had last year, the heart thing, a minor arrhythmia episode that kept me in the hospital for 2 days while they ran tests. Nothing serious, but Garrison had seemed worried at the time. Or so I thought. We need to be smart about this, Scarlett continued. I've been doing research. In Colorado, if someone's declared mentally incompetent, the family can take over their finances. For their own protection, of course. You think he'd go for that? He won't have a choice if we do it right. I know people at the bank, people who understand how these things work. We just need to establish a pattern, confusion, poor judgment, maybe some suspicious financial decisions. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours, staring out at the mountains. 25 years of building something to pass down to my son, and he was sitting in Denver with his wife, planning my funeral before I was even sick. That's when I started paying real attention. 3 months ago, I got a call from Dr. Pierce Hoffman, my cardiologist at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital. We'd served together in Iraq. He was a medic then. Saved my ass when an IED took out our convoy outside Fallujah. Now he's one of the best heart doctors in Denver. Byron, he said, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be straight with me. How's your mental health? Any confusion, memory issues? Pierce, what the hell kind of question is that? He was quiet for a moment. A woman called my office last week. Said she was your daughter-in-law. Very concerned about you. Asked detailed questions about dementia in cardiac patients, about the process for having someone declared mentally incompetent due to medical issues. My blood went cold. What did you tell her? Nothing. Patient confidentiality. But Byron, if your family's asking these kinds of questions, they're not asking out of concern, I figured. Just wanted to give you a heads up. You need anything documentation of your mental state, a second opinion, whatever, you call me. After that conversation, I started making my own calls. First, to my lawyer buddy from the American Legion. Then to a private investigator I'd heard about through the Veteran Network. If Scarlett wanted to play games with my mental capacity, I needed to understand the rules. That's how I learned about guardianship fraud, about predators who target elderly people with assets, especially those who might be isolated or vulnerable, about the legal mechanisms that could strip away everything I'd worked for and leave me powerless in some state facility while someone else spent my money. The investigator, Iris Summers, was a former FBI agent who'd gone private after 20 years with the Bureau. Tough as nails, with eyes that missed nothing. When I told her what I'd overheard, she nodded like she'd heard it all before. Your daughter-in-law's not being subtle about this, Iris said. Which means she's either stupid or desperate. My guess is desperate. What do you mean? People who target elderly relatives for money usually have their own financial problems. Let me do some digging. What she found made me sick to my stomach. Scarlett had gambling debts totaling $85,000 spread across 3 casinos in Black Hawk and Central City. She'd been borrowing against credit cards, taking cash advances, even got a loan from some private lender in Denver at 18% interest. Their house in Thornton was in foreclosure. They had 45 days before eviction. But that wasn't the worst part. She's done this before. Iris told me over coffee at a diner in Wheat Ridge. 3 years ago, in Grand Junction, an 80-year-old widower named Albert Vance. She worked at a bank there too, convinced him to withdraw $50,000 for some investment opportunity that never existed. What happened? Old man died of a heart attack 2 weeks later. Natural causes, according to the coroner, but the timing was suspicious. Scarlett had been named as a beneficiary in his updated will for $25,000. His family was too grief-stricken to ask hard questions. I pushed my coffee cup away. My hands were shaking. There's more. She's been shopping psychiatrists here in Denver, asking hypothetical questions about elderly patients with dementia, building a paper trail to support her claim that you're mentally incompetent. How many doctors? 4 that I've found so far. Same story each time, concerned daughter-in-law asking about an elderly relative showing signs of confusion and poor judgment. The picture was becoming clear. Scarlett hadn't just married my son for love, she'd married him for access to me, to my money, and when gambling ate through whatever she could steal quietly, she decided to go for the whole pot. Which brings me to last Tuesday afternoon. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 p.m., Through the frosted glass, I could see 2 figures with enough luggage for a month-long stay. I knew this day was coming. Iris had been tracking their movements, watching the foreclosure timeline. They were down to their last 30 days before eviction. I opened the door with a smile. "Dad," Scarlett pushed past me before I could say a word, dragging 2 massive suitcases that scraped against my hardwood floors. "We heard you bought this gorgeous cabin in Colorado. We're moving in to leave all the grudges behind us, don't you think?" She was already surveying my living room with those calculating eyes, probably adding up the value of every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall. Garrison stood behind her with 3 more bags, looking everywhere except at my face. This was the boy who used to run to me every evening when I came home from the shop, arms stretched wide for a hug. Now he couldn't even make eye contact. "Scarlett," I said, keeping my voice pleasant. "Garrison, what a surprise, isn't it wonderful?" She spun around, arms outstretched, like she was embracing her new kingdom. Family reunited at last. We've been so distant lately, and I said to Garrison, we need to fix this. Family is everything. Family is everything. I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. What they didn't know was that I'd been expecting this visit for weeks. When Iris called to say she'd tracked their car leaving Denver that morning, I'd made my final preparations. The moment I heard their engine pull into my driveway, I pressed record on my phone. Colorado's a one-party consent state, perfectly legal to record conversations in your own home. Of course, I said, reaching for one of their bags, "Let me help you get settled." The first few days were educational. Scarlett wasted no time making herself at home, immediately starting to redecorate my space. These dark leather chairs, "Dad, they're so masculine and heavy. We should brighten this place up with some lighter colors." She ran her fingers along the furniture I'd carefully chosen when I moved in, each piece selected to remind me of the life I'd built, the craftsmanship I appreciated. "I know a great interior designer in Denver," she continued. "She could really transform this place, make it more contemporary." Transform, there was that word again. The same word she'd probably used when convincing Albert Vance to transform his financial portfolio. "I'll think about it," I said, and went to make coffee while she continued her assessment. Meanwhile, I was conducting assessments of my own. On the second day, I left some documents on the kitchen table, investment statements showing my portfolio balance of $2.1 million right there in black and white. Then I retreated to my office and watched through the security camera I'd had installed. Scarlett found the papers within 20 minutes. She looked around carefully, checking if anyone was watching, then pulled out her phone. Click, 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 photographing every page, every account number, every balance. I had it all on video. That evening, I announced I was going for a drive. "Need to clear my head with some mountain air," I said. "Might be gone a few hours." "Take your time, Dad," Scarlett replied, that practiced smile never wavering. "We'll hold down the fort." Instead of driving the mountain roads, I headed straight to Denver to meet with Holden Reynolds. His law office occupied half a floor in a downtown building, and his reputation in elder law was exactly what I needed. tough, experienced, and utterly without tolerance for financial predators. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, shaking my hand across his mahogany desk. "You said this was urgent." I told him everything. The overheard phone call, Dr. Hoffman's warning about the psychiatric consultations, Scarlett's history with Albert Vance, the gambling debts, the foreclosure timeline. Holden listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "Colorado has strong protections for vulnerable adults," he said when I finished. "But guardianship cases can be complicated, especially when family members are involved. They'll need medical evidence that you're incapable of managing your affairs, which doesn't exist." "Exactly. That's your advantage, but we need to be proactive. I want you to undergo a comprehensive mental evaluation, independent clinic, board-certified geriatrician, full cognitive assessment. When they make their move, I want ironclad documentation that you're mentally sound. What else? Keep documenting everything. Those recordings are legal and valuable. And I think we should bring in additional expertise." He reached for his phone. "I know a forensic accountant who specializes in elder financial abuse cases. Luna Patterson, former IRS investigator, now works fraud cases exclusively." Luna Patterson's office was in Lakewood, a no-nonsense suite that looked more like an accountant's workspace than a detective's den. But the woman behind the desk had the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades following money trails. "Your daughter-in-law's financial situation is worse than desperate," Luna told me after a week of investigation. "The gambling debts total $85,000, but that's just what I can document. She owes money to 3 different casinos, plus at least 2 private lenders that I've identified." She spread printouts across her desk. Bank statements, credit reports, loan applications. Their house goes to foreclosure auction in 28 days. She's been kiting checks between accounts, taking cash advances on credit cards to make minimum payments on other credit cards. It's a classic spiral. How long can someone keep that up? Not long, which explains the urgency of targeting you. She needs a big score fast, or she's looking at bankruptcy and possible criminal charges for check fraud. Luna leaned back in her chair. "But here's what's really interesting. I found evidence of similar patterns in Grand Junction. The Albert Vance case you mentioned, she convinced him to make her a beneficiary on his life insurance policy too. $50,000 payout when he died. Jesus, gets worse. I've been tracking her movements over the past 6 months. She's made 3 trips to Colorado Springs, visited the VA hospital there twice, spent time in the parking lot talking to elderly men coming out of appointments. My blood ran cold. She's hunting. That's exactly what she's doing. And you're not her first target since Albert Vance. You're just the biggest one." The official papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by certified mail. The envelope bore the seal of the Pitkin County District Court, thick and official looking. Inside was a formal petition for emergency guardianship filed by Garrison Mitchell and Scarlett Mitchell on behalf of their incapacitated family member, Byron Mitchell. I read every word carefully. The petition cited serious concerns about cognitive decline, increasingly erratic behavior, paranoid delusions, and demonstrated inability to manage personal and financial affairs. It requested that the court appoint Garrison as my legal guardian with full authority over my medical decisions, living situation, and finances, effective immediately. Attached was a forged will, supposedly signed by me 6 months ago, leaving my entire estate to Garrison, with Scarlett named as executor. The signature looked good. She'd had practice forging documents, but I knew it wasn't mine. I called Holden immediately. They filed. I said, "Perfect. Now we can fight back properly. I've already retained Dr. Patricia Webb, the state's top forensic document examiner. She'll tear that fake will apart." "What about the guardianship petition? That's where your mental evaluation comes in. Dr. Sandra Quinn at University Hospital completed your assessment yesterday. Want to hear her findings? Give it to me straight." Quote, "Mr. Mitchell's cognitive function tests at the 98th percentile for his age group. His memory is excellent, his reasoning skills are sharp, and there's absolutely no indication of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other cognitive impairment." End quote. For the first time in months, I smiled. Will she testify to that? She's eager to. Apparently she's tired of seeing competent elderly people victimized by guardianship fraud. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Judge Margaret Sullivan presiding, a former prosecutor with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings and zero tolerance for elder abuse. That weekend, Iris made one final discovery that sealed Scarlett's fate. I've been monitoring her communications. Iris told me over the phone. She's been in contact with someone in Las Vegas, her sister Monica. They've been discussing escape routes, talking about what to do if things go south in Colorado. Flight risk? Absolutely. But that's not the most interesting part. I pulled Monica's financial records. She works at a nursing home in Henderson, Nevada, and 3 elderly residents there have had their bank accounts drained over the past year. Same pattern, small withdrawals at first, then larger amounts, all authorized by someone with power of attorney. Jesus Christ. It's a family business, Byron. They've been running this scam across state lines for years. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. The courthouse in downtown Aspen was already busy when I arrived with Holden and our team of experts. Scarlett sat at the plaintiff's table with a public defender. She could no longer afford private counsel. She dressed conservatively for court, trying to look like a concerned daughter-in-law, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. Garrison sat behind her, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Judge Sullivan reviewed the documents before her with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. "We're here on the matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell," she began. "I've reviewed the petition for emergency guardianship and the supporting documentation." Scarlett's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, my clients are simply concerned about Mr. Mitchell's welfare. Recent behavior suggests significant cognitive decline, and they feel immediate intervention is necessary to protect his assets and well-being." I see Judge Sullivan said dryly. "Mr. Reynolds, I understand you have some concerns about this petition." Holden rose smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor. We're not just opposing this guardianship petition. We're exposing it as part of a calculated scheme to defraud my client of his assets through fabricated medical claims and forged documents." He opened his briefcase and presented our evidence methodically. Dr. Webb's forensic analysis proving the will was forged. Dr. Quinn's comprehensive mental evaluation confirming my cognitive competence. Luna Patterson's financial investigation revealing the gambling debts and the pattern of elder abuse across multiple states. But the most damning evidence was the audio recordings. When the judge heard Scarlett's voice saying, "When's he going to kick the bucket and stop being such a burden?" the courtroom went silent. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I walked to the witness stand, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Then I told my story, not just about the conspiracy against me, but about what I'd lost. My son, my business, my faith and family. "Mr. Mitchell," the prosecutor asked, "what would you like to see happen as a result of these proceedings?" I looked directly at Scarlett. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw the fear underneath. "I want other elderly people to know they don't have to be victims," I said. "We built what we have through hard work and sacrifice. We're not going to hand it over to predators who see us as easy marks." Judge Sullivan's ruling was swift and decisive. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. "Mrs. Mitchell, you are charged with forgery, fraud, and attempted exploitation of an at-risk adult." Scarlett was arrested that afternoon at the Black Hawk Casino, trying to win enough money to flee the state. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 3 months later, she pleaded guilty to avoid federal charges. 18 months in state prison, 5 years probation and full restitution to me and Albert Vance's family. Garrison came to see me the night after her sentencing. He stood on my porch looking broken, finally free of her influence, but lost without it. "Dad," he said quietly, "I don't know how to apologize for what I've done." "You can start by rebuilding your life," I told him. "Get clean, get honest, find work that means something to you. Come back to me in a year as the man I raised you to be." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "A year? 1 year. Prove you've changed. It's been 8 months now." Garrison calls every Sunday, tells me about his job at a machine shop in Lakewood, about the mistakes he's making and the things he's learning. He hasn't asked for money once. Last week I received an anonymous cashier's check for $500 made out to the Byron Mitchell Veterans Foundation. I'm using my settlement money to help young veterans learn trades, just like metalwork helped me after Iraq. This morning, I'm sitting on my deck with coffee, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. A hawk circles overhead, patient and watchful. My phone buzzes with a text from my neighbor Wade. "Fishing this afternoon." I smile and type back. "Sounds perfect. Sometimes you have to fight for what's yours. But when the fight's over, you remember what really matters. Justice feels good, but rebuilding what was broken feels even better." If you're dealing with something similar, remember this. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old to fight back. We didn't build what we have by giving up, and we're not about to start now.